I never thought of myself as paranoid. I work as a graphic designer, spend evenings binge-watching shows with my girlfriend Mia, and enjoy weekend hikes. Our little house on the outskirts of a Pennsylvania town is cozy and quiet, just how I like it. But lately, something has felt off. About a month ago, after finishing a late-night deadline, I heard a soft thumping from the basement. I paused, straining to listen. It could have been the old pipes or the house settling. I brushed it off, but couldn't shake the nagging feeling. I made a mental note to check it in the morning. "Did you hear that noise last night?" I asked Mia at breakfast. She looked up from her coffee, slightly furrowed. "It's probably just the house settling. You know how old it is," she replied, pouring another cup. I nodded, but unease lingered, like the last drops of coffee in my cup. The next week, the thumping returned, louder this time, almost like a heartbeat. I decided to investigate. The stairs creaked under my weight, and the faint smell of damp wood greeted me at the bottom. As I reached the bottom, the thumping stopped. I stood in the dim light, shadows dancing on the walls, and the flickering bulb overhead hummed ominously. I turned to leave, but noticed a faint, smeared mark on the floor near the far wall, dark as if something had been dragged. "Mia, should we clean the basement? I noticed a weird mark," I suggested that evening, trying to dismiss my fear. She waved me off with a smile. "It's probably just dirt. We'll get to it when we have time." Weeks passed, and the thumping continued, waking me at odd hours. Mia remained oblivious, lost in her own world. I found myself checking the basement more often, dread building within me like a weight on my chest. I began to hear whispers, soft, indecipherable, yet persistent. One night, while working late, the power flickered, plunging the room into darkness. I cursed and fumbled for my phone, using its light to guide me. That's when I heard it again. The thumping, now louder and frantic. My heart raced. Against my better judgment, I grabbed a flashlight and headed down. The basement felt colder than usual, with thick, suffocating air. I scanned the room, but the shadows twisted unnaturally. The thumping had turned into desperate banging. I felt my stomach churn. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaky. Silence answered back, heavy and oppressive. Then the whispers returned, louder, a cacophony of hushed voices clawing at my sanity. I stumbled backward, nearly falling as the sounds crescendoed. I shone the flashlight towards the far wall and froze, a faint figure, outlined in the dark. Instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't move. It felt like I was being drawn in. "Help me," the voice pleaded, a soft whisper. My throat constricted. Just then, Mia's voice called from upstairs, breaking through the fog of fear. "Babe, everything okay down there?" I tore myself away from the shadow, sprinting up the stairs, practically tripping. I slammed the door shut behind me, heart pounding. I saw something," I managed to say, shaken. "She might not just be exhausted? You've been working late a lot," she replied, concern on her face. I wanted to argue, to share my experience, but her look made me hesitate. I forced a smile and changed the subject, but dread festered within me. The whispers and thumping had become part of me. The next day, I decided to confront it. I grabbed a hammer, determined to clear the clutter in the basement and find out what lurked down there. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever awaited. As I descended the stairs, a chill gripped me. The shadows pulsed. I flicked on the flashlight and gasped. The mark on the floor had spread, now resembling a hand, as if something had clawed its way out. The thumping began again, accompanied by frantic scratching, like fingernails against wood. I slammed my eyes shut, fighting the urge to flee. "Help me!" The voice echoed again, twisting in my mind. I stumbled backward, heart racing, but it felt as if something blocked my way. I don't remember how I got back upstairs, only that I locked the basement door behind me and collapsed against it, gasping for air. Mia found me moments later, concern flooding her face. "What happened? Are you okay?" I couldn't answer. The walls felt like they were closing in, whispers clawing at my sanity. The warmth of the house felt suffocating, alive, watching. Days passed, and I tried to push it aside, but every night the thumping returned, an incessant reminder that whatever was down there was not finished with me. The whispers became clearer, crying, pleading, begging for release. I contemplated calling someone, but feared their dismissal, the way they'd look at me as if I was losing my mind. So I stayed quiet, haunted by the knowledge that something sinister lurked beneath our home. Now I sit here typing this, the basement door locked tight, yet I can still hear the thumping. It's louder tonight, urgent. The whispers have turned into screams, drowning out my thoughts. I can't shake the feeling that it knows I'm here, aware of my fear, waiting patiently. I'm not sure how much longer I can endure this. As I lay in bed, trying to drown out the noise, I realize the true horror isn't what's in the basement. It's the certainty that it won't stay there forever.
The neighbors next door. I moved into my new home in a quiet suburb of Ohio about 6 months ago. The cul-de-sac was lined with neat houses, each seemingly perfect for families. My husband, Tom, and I dreamed of starting a family ourselves, and this space felt right. The first few weeks were filled with unpacking and settling in, accompanied by the comforting sounds of laughter and chatter from the neighbors. One evening, while organizing the kitchen, I heard snippets of conversation through the open window. The Johnsons across the street were hosting a barbecue, their voices bright and cheerful, punctuated by the sizzling burgers. I smiled, feeling excited about potential friendships. Maybe I'll bake cookies and bring them over, I thought, though time slipped by. As weeks passed, something peculiar emerged. The Johnsons, once friendly, became increasingly reclusive. I glimpsed them through sheer curtains, their figures moving in darkened rooms, but there were no more barbecues or cheerful greetings. Laughter vanished, replaced by an unsettling silence. One night, while folding laundry, I heard faint knocking from the Johnsons' house. It had a rhythmic quality, almost like a heartbeat. I turned off the TV, straining to listen. The knocking continued, now accompanied by low mumbling, indistinct but eerie. An unexpected chill crept down my spine. Maybe they're just busy, I whispered, trying to dismiss my unease. But sleep eluded me. Days passed, and the odd sounds returned, feeling like an uninvited guest. I tried to bring it up with Tom during dinner. "Have you noticed anything strange about the Johnsons?" I asked. He shook his head, oblivious. "Maybe they're just busy. Don't worry about it." But I couldn't help it. I found myself staring out the window at their house, shadows flickering on the walls. One evening, I decided to walk around the block, hoping to catch a glimpse of them. The air was thick with autumn scents, leaves crunching underfoot. Their front yard had turned into an unkempt wilderness, grass overgrown and hedges stretching like skeletal fingers. As I turned to leave, I noticed a figure in the window. A woman stood there, pale and gaunt, eyes wide and unblinking, locking onto mine. My heart raced, and I hurried back home, dread settling in my stomach. The sounds escalated from that night. The knocking morphed into desperate scratching, fingernails scraping wood. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. Tom remained oblivious, consumed by his job and weekend sports. I wished I could confide in someone, but family and friends were miles away. It felt like I was alone in this silent nightmare. One night, unable to sleep, I took a midnight stroll outside. The moon cast an eerie glow, illuminating the street in ghostly silver. The profound silence felt as if the world was holding its breath. The scratching echoed again, clearer now, coming from the Johnsons' house. My heart pounded as I turned to face their home. The front door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit hallway. An inexplicable urge drew me closer, almost pulling me in. I crept toward the threshold, the cold air biting at my skin. Then for a brief moment, I heard a low, chilling whisper. "Help me! Help us!" I stumbled back, breathless, as the door swung shut, plunging the house into silence. Panic surged through me. Was it a plea for help? Or something darker? I darted back home, locking the door behind me, desperate to drown out the haunting whispers. The next day was worse. I glued myself to the window as an ambulance pulled up to the Johnsons' house. Paramedics rushed in and the door swung open to reveal chaos. A sickening knot formed in my stomach. Had something terrible happened? As the day wore on, I saw two figures being wheeled out, covered with blankets. I squinted, trying to catch a glimpse of their faces, but only saw the paramedics, their expressions grave. A wave of nausea washed over me. Later that night, Tom returned home, blissfully unaware of the day's events. He poured himself a drink and settled in. I tried to explain everything, the whispers, the scratching, but he offered a sympathetic smile. "You're just stressed, honey. You need to relax." When he turned away, my heart sank. I knew he wouldn't believe me, leaving me alone with my fear. The next few days were agonizingly quiet. The Johnsons' house stood like a dark monument, a reminder of my dread. I felt like I was living in a horror film, always on edge, waiting for a jump scare. Then one evening, I noticed a shadow move past the window. Too dark, too swift. My breath caught. I hurried to the window, pulling the curtains aside. The street was empty, the moon casting long shadows. But then I heard it again, the scratching, louder, as if it were right outside my door. I froze, heart racing. The sounds escalated, a cacophony of desperate nails clawing against wood. It wasn't just from the Johnsons' house anymore. It surrounded me, echoing in my own home. With shaking hands, I grabbed my phone. I needed to call someone. As I dialed, the scratching stopped abruptly. My heart thudded. Then I heard it, a soft knock at my front door. I stared, frozen. A whisper followed, barely audible. "Help me! Help us!" And as I stood there, paralyzed by dread, phone in hand, I realized the truth. I was no longer just an observer. I was part of this horror now. I had no idea what would happen next.
Type always found comfort in routine. My days are filled with the hum of the office printer, the faint smell of coffee clinging to my clothes, and the chatter of my colleagues at a small marketing agency in Denver. Evenings are spent at home with my wife Clara and our two kids, Lucy and Max. Life is predictable, and I thought that was a good thing. Then I noticed the sounds. It started about 3 weeks ago. While preparing dinner, I heard a faint tapping noise from the back of the house, near the laundry room. "Did anyone else hear that?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Clara looked up, her brow furrowing. "It's probably just the old pipes settling, honey." "Yeah, maybe," I replied, though unease twisted in my gut. As the week wore on, the tapping persisted, starting around 9 in the evening just as we tucked the kids in. I tried to dismiss it, but the more I heard, the more compelled I felt to investigate. One night, after Clara had gone to bed, I decided to face it. The kids were asleep, their soft breaths echoing through the hallway. I padded down to the laundry room, heart racing, and pressed my ear against the wall. The tapping was louder now, rhythmic, almost purposeful. It felt like someone trying to get my attention, yet I felt paralyzed, as if moving away would break a fragile spell. "Hello," I whispered. Nothing answered but the muted thrum of the house settling. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay in bed, listening to shadows dance in the corners of our room. Clara's gentle snores filled the silence, a comforting lull against the unease creeping into my mind. The next day I mentioned it to a coworker, James, during lunch. "Maybe it's just a critter," he suggested, a teasing smile on his face. "You know, a raccoon or something getting cozy in your wall." "Yeah, very funny," I replied, but deep down, I was worried. I knew I needed to figure it out. By the weekend, the tapping escalated. It felt urgent, like someone was desperately trying to break through. Clara noticed too, explaining it away as the house settling or perhaps an animal. But one night, I woke to a different noise. It was no longer tapping, it was a low, guttural sound, like someone crying. I shot up in bed, heart racing, looking over at Clara, still peacefully asleep. I got out of bed and crept down the hallway, each step amplifying the sounds in the house. As I neared the laundry room, the crying grew louder, mingled with an unsettling whisper that made my skin crawl. "Help me," it seemed to say, over and over. My breath caught in my throat. The laundry room door stood slightly ajar, casting a shadow into the hallway. I hesitated, instinct screaming at me to turn back, but curiosity tugged me forward. I pushed the door open. The room was dark, the only light coming from a small window above the washer, casting eerie shadows across the floor. My eyes scanned the space, landing on the wall where the sound seemed to be emanating from. "Hello!" My voice trembled. The crying stopped. Silence enveloped the room, thick and suffocating. I moved closer, pressing my ear against the wall again. "Is anyone there?" At that moment, I felt a cold breeze waft through the room, sending shivers down my spine. I stumbled back, tripping over the laundry basket. As I regained my footing, I noticed something strange. A small crack in the wall, just enough to glimpse a dark space beyond. I reached out, fingers trembling, and pressed against it. The wall shifted slightly, as if pushing back against my touch. The whisper returned, frantic and urgent. "Help me!" Panic surged through me, and I pulled my hand away, heart pounding. I glanced back at the door. It was closed now, a solid barrier that felt like a prison. "Clara!" I shouted, voice breaking. The door felt heavier, as if something was pressing against it from the other side. I pounded on it with my fists, panic giving way to terror. Just as I shouted for Clara again, the wall vibrated violently, the whisper morphing into anguished cries. Then, silence. The door swung open and I stumbled backward, landing hard on the floor. Clara stood there, hair tousled and eyes wide. "What's wrong?" Did you hear that?" I gasped, breathing heavily. "Hear what?" The shadows felt alive, twisting and writhing. I looked back at the wall, the crack now gone, as if it had never existed. The wall was crying! Clara frowned, confusion washing over her face. "You need to get some sleep," she said softly, guiding me back toward the bedroom. That night I lay awake, the weight of thousands of fears pressing down on me. I could still hear it, the faint tapping, the whispers, the cries. But as dawn broke, clarity pushed through the fog of terror. I'd call a contractor to check everything. But as I sat at the kitchen table that morning, coffee in hand, Clara bustling about with the kids, I caught a glimpse of the laundry room door. It was ajar, just slightly, a crack for the darkness to seep through. I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. The tapping began again, soft and persistent, but this time no one else seemed to hear it. And as I took a deep breath, a chilling reminder settled deep within me. Sometimes the horrors we face are hidden just beneath the surface of our everyday lives.
I never thought much about our neighbor, Mrs. Whitaker. She lived alone in a quaint house next to ours, a dull blue, paint peeling at the edges like memories of a once vibrant life. I'd catch glimpses of her through the curtains, moving around, gardening, always solitary. I'd wave hello if I saw her in the yard, but she never waved back, just a nod, her eyes darting away as if I were an intruder. I had my own chaos to manage. With 2 kids, a demanding job, and a husband who worked nights, peace came only in rare, quiet moments. On those evenings, I'd pour a glass of wine and settle in the living room with a book, letting the world outside fade into background noise. But one Tuesday night changed everything. The kids were asleep, and I had just curled up with my novel when I heard it, a soft tapping. At first, I thought it was the wind, but the rhythm was too deliberate. I paused, straining to listen. It came again, a steady knock, 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 followed by silence and a whispering sound. I shook my head, convincing myself it was the house settling, old like Mrs. Whitaker. The next day, I mentioned it to my husband, Tom, who chuckled, "You've got to stop reading those ghost stories, hun. It's just the wind." I laughed it off, but unease settled in my stomach like a stone. The following nights, the tapping returned, sometimes louder, sometimes softer, but always there, like a distant heartbeat. I began noticing shadows flickering in Mrs. Whitaker's windows, strange shapes darting across the walls whenever I glanced over. I asked my kids if they had seen anything odd, but they shrugged, more interested in their games than our neighbors' peculiarities. One evening, curiosity got the better of me. I decided to bake cookies and bring them over, a peace offering or an attempt to break the ice. As I approached her front door, an unsettling chill washed over me. The air felt thick, and I could almost hear my heart thudding in my ears. I knocked softly, and after a moment, the door creaked open. Mrs. Whitaker stood there, her dark hair unkempt, eyes sweeping over me like a shadow. She asked, "What do you want?" "I brought you some cookies. I thought you might like them." I held out the plate, forcing a smile. Her gaze flickered to the cookies, then back to me. "I don't eat sweets," she said flatly, before shutting the door. I stood there a moment, feeling like an intruder in my own neighborhood. When I got home, I told Tom about my experience, but he just shook his head. "You're being paranoid. She's just an old lady." I tried to take his advice, but that night the tapping felt different. It was urgent, frantic, a plea covered in darkness. As I lay in bed, the sound became a chant, a rhythm resonating deep within my chest. I pressed my hands to my ears, but the whispers slithered into my mind, wrapping around my thoughts. "Help me! Help me!" The next morning, I woke with a sense of dread, a heaviness clinging to me like fog. I decided to check on Mrs. Whitaker. Maybe she was ill or needed someone to talk to. When I knocked, she answered almost immediately, her expression stark, eyes wide. "What do you want?" I replied, my voice shaky. Her jaw tightened, and she pulled the door slightly more closed. "I'm fine, just leave me alone." But I couldn't leave it alone. Something was off. Days turned into weeks, and I spiraled. I hadn't seen her in days. The curtains remained drawn, her yard overgrown. I knocked again one evening, desperation creeping in. No answer. As I turned to leave, I noticed a shape in the window, a dark shadow behind the glass, watching. I couldn't sleep that night. The tapping turned into scratching, as if something was trying to claw its way out. I reached out to local authorities, but they dismissed it as a neighborly dispute. The night after that, the whispers grew louder. "Help me, please." I woke to find my children standing at the foot of my bed, their faces pale and wide-eyed. "Mommy, there's a lady outside," my daughter whispered, pointing toward the window. I rushed to the window, heart pounding. The streetlight illuminated my yard and Mrs. Whitaker's house. But she wasn't in her yard. Instead, a figure stood in the darkness, too indistinct to see clearly. I blinked, and in that instant, she vanished. Only the darkness remained, heavy and oppressive. I don't remember how the night passed, but I know I didn't sleep. The next morning, I decided to confront the shadow. I approached her house, but the door swung open before I could knock. She stood there, eyes wide, a twisted smile spreading across her face. "You shouldn't have come here," she said, a low voice. "Where have you been?" I gasped, backing away. "Help me," she said, stepping forward, and for a moment I swore the shadows behind her swirled and shifted, forming grotesque shapes around her. I turned and ran.
Now I sit in my house, curtains drawn, lights dim, hoping to drown out the tapping and whispers. But they're here, in the walls, in the corners, creeping closer every night. Each sound sends waves of panic through me. I can't shake the feeling that she's still watching, waiting for me to open my door, to step into her world. Every night, the tapping grows louder, the whispers more insistent, and I wonder, what happens if I don't help her? What happens if I do? The shadows outside dance in the darkness, and I know it's only a matter of time before they come for me.